over the last 15 days to 3 weeks, whenever I've gone around meeting people, people would ask, what do you think will happen with the war? So you know what I told them? I said, for the answer, show up at the NGMA at 3:30 on Sunday. You have two outstanding speakers and experts on this subject who will give you a much better answer than we can conjecture. So here we are, and I can promise you a stupendous session. And thank you for joining after lunch. This auditorium has two sections, the left and the right, virtually and ideologically as well. So I think it's good to see both sides equally filled, which ensures a very good conversation going forward. So without much ado, we'll just jump into the conversation, jump into a fun-filled, riveting conversation about a very interesting and absorbing and a rather critical subject of our time. We have been grappling with this for a while, and for decades the US has believed that they had this under control. They would always be negotiating with Iran, sanctions, or putting Iran under pressure. But no US president actually pulled the trigger. For years, the US threatened Iran, but never went to a full-scale conflict. Until 28th February 2026, when all that changed. When the US attacked, I'm just setting up the context, the Americans attacked Iran, and in the first day of strikes, as they call it, the decapitation strike, took out the Iranian Supreme Leader Ali Khamenei, and believed that the war would be closed very easily. But this was not a war like an operation in Venezuela, or even in the earlier 12-day war in June 2025, if you want to take your mind back to that. This was going to be very different. The Iranians hit back at American interests in the Gulf and surprised a lot of people by hitting Diego Garcia. And at the end of it all, we have had a campaign which has had shifting goalposts, shifting aims, shifting objectives. The interesting part was the objective was to change the regime in Iran, which did not happen. The objective now is to keep the Hormuz Strait open, which has been open before the war. So we have done all of that to finally arrive at keeping the Hormuz Strait open. So that's where we are. Let me go to you, Ambassador Raghavan, with my opening question, the timing and trigger of the US action. I mentioned about how the successive American presidents haven't really gone on a full-scale attack on Iran, barring Donald Trump. Why now?
Firstly, thank you very much for inviting me. I'm so happy to see so many people on a Sunday afternoon. Why now? Clearly, it has a great deal to do with the nature of the US presidency at the moment. That is an objective factor in all the calculations, and that is the personality and the approach and the decision-making style of President Trump. The second, of course, is the relationship he has with the President of Israel, with the Prime Minister of Israel. And the Israeli US concern against Iran, it has matured in this way because of a certain churn in West Asia for the past 2 years. So I think these general factors explain why President Trump decided to embark on a course of action which all other presidents so far had resisted since 1979. It's not as if they didn't feel provoked by Iran, but they felt that conflict with Iran will push the entire Gulf into a wider combat, and that is not good for our interests. But clearly President Trump felt otherwise. Possibly, why did he do it? Why did It's useful to remember that with great power also comes great hubris. And great powers always miscalculate. You can think of the Americans in Vietnam, you can think of the Soviets in Afghanistan, you can think of the Americans in Afghanistan. Again, that with military power, there is a certain element of wishful thinking which creeps in thinking that you can realize political objectives by the application of military force. And the reality is that it's easier to start a war, and then you are confronted with this situation that you don't know how to finish it.
I go to you, Minaz, and my question is leading from what he said. Did America get sucked into a precision trap? Did America, go there to fight Israel's war finally, when they were avoiding it so long?
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Thanks for being here.
Keep the mic closer.
Yeah, can you hear me now? So, good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you for being here. Thank you, Karan, for your introduction. I think the answer to your question is a one-word answer, and that begins with an N, N with a U, Netanyahu. On the 27th of February, just about a month ago, there was a series of negotiations going on in Oman between American and Iranian interlocutors. That particular negotiation was almost over, and on uranium enrichment, on missile, etc., all of that was almost agreed upon. On the 27th of February, Netanyahu calls Trump and tells him, no. Iran is within 2 weeks of acquiring a nuclear weapon. 2 weeks. And it's going to be a great danger to America. We have to strike now. And Trump, being what he is, and you know what Trump is, listen to that. It's a completely false advice, because Iran was nowhere near a nuclear device. And he said, okay, let's strike. 1 day later, on the 28th of February, they launched a Tomahawk missile on a girls' school, Binab school, killing 165 young children. 1 day later, when the Oman negotiation was still going on, and Netanyahu was the man who Trump told Pete Hegseth, his defense secretary, now renamed war secretary, so now you can understand where Trump is coming from. So the war secretary, Pete Hegseth, said, attack now, and we are going to throw the entire Geneva Convention out. No war tribunal, no nothing. All rules of law out. We will punish Iran with lethal force, lethality. So that is when the war started 1 day later, and that is why the timing is not accidental. The timing is Netanyahu. We saw that this was the moment when he could completely finish Iran. Something he's been planning to do for 35 years.
Yeah.
Ever since 1994-95. If you look at his party, Likud, the ruling party of Israel. In its manifesto, the very first line says that we do not believe in a two-nation Palestine-Israel sovereign state. So right for 35 years, Netanyahu, who's been prime minister off and on in this period, has looked for an opportunity to crush Iran. He did that in June with the 12-day war. We took bombers. Now we got this opportunity, and he took on a lot more than he could chew. 30 days later, they're looking for an exit ramp, and there is no exit at the moment, because the Houthis and all the others have joined them.
Yeah, I'll come to the exit plan as well. One question on the timing again. Do you agree, you can ask this point, do you think the 12-day war in June gave the US and Israel a signal that Iran could penetrate the Iron Dome, could hit Israel, and therefore Israel wasn't very much prepared, which is what I also hear and understand. That that's one of the plausible causes. Why February? Why March? Why February? Why not do? I mean, you had started a war, but it was a trend. It ended after a while. Did not continue.
I think the way the Israelis possibly presented the argument to the Americans were that the Iranians are seriously weakened, possibly because of internal protests and because of wider changes in West Asia. They are weaker than at any time in the last 45 years. This is an opportunity if you want to put an end to this regime. Now, the US has equally deep mistrust and dislike of the Iranians, and President Trump would have felt that this is an offer which is too good to say no to, or it's an offer he can't refuse. And possibly also they may have felt, and we've received hints to that effect, that regardless of whether we go in or not, the Israelis are going to go in. So we may as well also go in and finish the job. The problem in both these calculations was that they underestimated the extent of resistance, and that war plans would not work out in the way they wanted. Now, and in fact, this is a familiar story. The Russians went into Ukraine thinking that they would wind it up in 2 or 3 days or 1 week at the most, but it doesn't work. It's easy to make the plans, but then the plans don't work in the way you want.
Right. So I'll take this last point of yours, and my next question is based on that. The Russians have gone to Ukraine, the Americans have gone to Iran. There's a protracted war there going on. We often forget the Ukraine-Russia war because that's how the world is. We are always obsessed with the current, but we have 2 wars going on. Does that mean it's advantage China in some time once we merge out of this the current tussle that's going on?
Well, you could argue, because it is possible that the US may come out from this encounter somewhat bruised. It would have invested a great deal of its energy and capital and attention, and you could argue that the Chinese have benefited. On the other hand, just like most other economies, they are also badly impacted because of major supply chain disruptions. What will happen at the end of the war, I think we are still too much in the midst of it to be able to foresee. Whether it's going to lead to wider changes, whether one power will gain enormously. You see, great powers embarking on an enterprise thousands of miles away from themselves, failing and then going back to life as normal is not new.
Right.
The Americans did it in Vietnam, they did it in Afghanistan. For all you know, they may pick up the pieces after some time and move away from this too. On the other hand, it may also have a major impact on their own international credibility and also on their domestic, configurations where their politics is concerned. So we have to see. I think it's too early to decide that China is the major winner in this encounter.
So, picking up from what Ambassador Raghavan said, when we look at the great power conflict, and you've written in your book, An Era of India, and you're talking about the shifting of global power from the West to the East. How do you put all of this in the historical context? The thing is, Iran has been waiting for this all along as a civilization. The US is deciding now. How do you put it in context?
Yeah, what Ambassador said is absolutely right. It's early to judge. A few points do emerge. I think this is an important geopolitical inflection point. If you look at history, going back too far, but Napoleon, Waterloo, 1815, he lost that particular battle, and then the French Empire collapsed. The British Empire rose. Then 100 years later, there was Germany, who are the cousins of Britain, because they share the same genes, and Hitler in the 1930s, when he took over in 1933, was greatly impressed by Britain and the British Empire, and he praised in his autobiography, Mein Kampf, how great the British Empire was and how Germany should replicate Britain's modus operandi in Eastern Europe, right up through the Soviet Union. So the French Empire collapsed. The British Empire collapsed because America in 1945 became the default empire. because of Hitler, because Hitler destroyed the British Empire, essentially, and India would not have got freedom in 1947 that early if it hadn't been for the Second World War, started by Hitler. So now, this is the American Empire for the past 100 years, approximately. Napoleon, 100 years, Britain, 100 years, and now we have the American Empire. Inflection point, we are into war. Not only this particular war, Vietnam, Cambodia, Laos, Afghanistan, this is the whole of Latin America. So this particular war in the Middle East, where there are 45 military bases in the Middle East, there is no exit ramp. And I think historically, an empire loses traction with war. And that is where the point Ambassador made, will China benefit from this? Yeah. Who benefited from Napoleon? Britain. Who benefited from Hitler? America, eventually. And who will benefit from this particular American entanglement in the Middle East and elsewhere? China. But my view of China, and I've written about this for quite a few years, is not that positive. I think they are looking at a demographic cliff, a precipice, and it goes downward. They're losing millions of people per day in terms of their demography. It's a shrinking country, it's an aging country, consumption is down, and I think that the Chinese economy is growing at 4.5% a year, which is one-third the rate traditionally. Yeah, even that are fudged economic data. So China has a good future, but the one reason why China has become more friendly to India, and it's talking of the pas de deux in French, the ballet of the dragon and the elephant, is because they realize that there's no point in having a conflict with India while they themselves are isolated in the South China Sea, isolated from American trading, and completely out of the Middle East situation. So China's future not as rosy as a lot of people think.
Do you not feel that, with the US committing all its resources, and if it were to go on as a protracted war, who therefore benefits at the end of it? How does that work?
Well, in my view, it's premature to announce the demise of US as a great power. As a military force, they have huge capacities and huge wavelengths, and what they have committed right now to the combat operations in Iran is a very small fraction of their overall spectrum of capacities that they possess. But clearly, they are in the middle of a combat situation which they did not expect to be. Certainly, no one in the US system thought that this would go on for 1 month and that they would be looking for ways to settle it which would appear like a win-win for them at least, and a lose-lose for Iran, and the Iranians are proving to be more difficult negotiators also than they had imagined. So in that sense, yes, it is a setback for them. But I would hesitate to say that this is such a decisive setback that it hands major victory or major gain to China or anywhere else on a platter.
Right. The war is also connected. Let's cut to the present and what's going on at the moment. The war is also connected so much to the global trade and commerce and affecting all of it. Unlike any previous wars, it's been very different. And so, therefore, question to both of you is: how much will this war's progress and going forward would be dependent on the key parts such as choking Iran's economic lifeline? You're talking about landing the 82nd Airborne Division in the 31st Airborne Unit in the Kharg Islands, basically Iran's economic lifeline. How do you see the next stage evolving from the current scenario?
Well, I'm not a military person, but to my understanding, the war is now at the situation now is balanced on a knife's edge. It can go either way. But my reading of the actual conflict is that now we are moving beyond the stage where you evaluate capacities and objective combat strengths. I think, at some stage in a conflict, something which is called the national psyche, the mood of the nation kicks in. We saw an example of this in the Iran-Iraq war in the 1980s. when both fought on against all odds. They were fighting from carrier to carrier or from shipload to shipload, often using the most basic kind of equipment possible. But they fought on for 8 or 9 years. So I think we are possibly nearing that stage where more subjective factors like the psyche, the history, the national will may kick in. And when that happens, then the war enters a more elemental and more combustible kind of stage. Whether it will remain confined to the particular theatre it is now in, whether it will expand, all those are unknowns.
Right.
Yeah, I agree with the Ambassador by and large. But a couple of other points. I think, number one, when we talk about America losing its power, I not for a second believe that it has lost its power, but this is the beginning of the end of the American superpower era. And that will last for 25 years because these things take time. Even the British Empire took a long time to dissipate. They held their soft power, their control over media, television, film, controlling the narrative, and that continues to this day. To the British Empire is gone, they still want to put the prefix Great Britain. So, empires decline slowly, but they decline. And America is definitely on a downward path. Now, China is upward, but it's for its own weaknesses. America is also fractured ideologically between the left and the right, Democrats, Republicans. The kind of processions we saw in America in major cities, New York, Washington, Los Angeles, San Francisco, yesterday, no kings there, protests. That shows the kind of fracture in American society. So America is not in the kind of position that it was 30 or 40 years ago. It's never, ever won a war. It lost in Vietnam, it lost in Afghanistan, it's lost every single war that it has fought. So, while I'm not disparaging American power, I certainly think that one should not highlight it more than it deserves to be highlighted.
Right. So I'll pick up on your point about America's decline will take its own time, and China has its issues. In your book, Era of India, you talk about India as a global power, as a civilization rising. That's risen not on the back of conquest. It's very interesting. How do you?
I want to talk about that because my book, the last chapter.
It's also connected to this because we're talking about India's choices.
Exactly. I wrote this book obviously some time ago, and what Trump has done pretty much validates what I wrote in my epilogue. This is what America is going to do, and exactly what they're doing. And this is what America will be in the next 25 years, what India will be in the next 25 years, and where China will be. That's basically the last 1/3 of the book. So I think that there will be a hiccup for Indian growth. The trading, the oil problem, $110 a barrel, and all of that, we know the kind of growth problems we're going to have in the next few months. But there will be an exit price. We don't realize that Trump is desperate to end the war because the two events coming up. One is the FIFA World Cup on June 11th. Now, the elite footballers of the world are going to come to America by the 1st week of May. And there's a war going on in West Asia, with travel routes uncertain, flights cancelled. The whole World Cup is in jeopardy in America. And then on July 4th is the 250th anniversary of American independence. And Trump is going to throw a big party for that, with the war going on. So he's got this kind of war. He's got to end it by mid-April. But the Iranians know this, and they're not going to let him end it. They say, you surrender. You said it obliterated us, but we're still firing missiles at you. I think they're going to obliterate you. So he's going to make Trump back down, and that's the way it's going to happen. For India is concerned, hiccups of course, but I always look at India, and I've written about this in my columns. India is quite a negative-minded country. We underestimate ourselves all the time. We punch below our geopolitical weight, and we've done that for 50 years. Because we are a subjugated country intellectually, the Mughals, the British, and so on. Now, we've gotten out of that gradually, but we still retain that negativity, a certain amount of pessimism. So you have a glass of water which is half full. What does an Indian say? Water half full. But a lot of Indians say it's half empty.
So yes, but from the signals that are sent out, the perceptions that are sent, how do you think Indian diplomacy has approached this, and what do you think are India's choices?
Well, I must confess, I belong to the glass half empty school. I think that it's better to arrive and not announce your arrival in advance. So I think we have some way to go. We have done very well. We are doing very well, but we have a long way to go. So we shouldn't announce our arrival before we have got where we want to
It's
be.
like the Chinese leader Deng,
That's
who
right.
said, hide your strength, bide your
So
time.
I don't think we should. I think we should bide our time. Wait, and that applies to different situations. You can't. In the present conflict, it's very clear. You know, an objective reading shows that your relations with number one, the Gulf states. You have 10 million Indians over there, and they are very much a party. They may not be a party to the conflict, but they are a party in the conflict. And secondly, your relations with the US, and thirdly, your relations with Israel. Now, these far outweigh all the equities you may have with Iran. And this is an objective assessment of your overall relationships. So while it militates against one's natural sympathy with the underdog, but your interests push you in a direction that you have to see, you know, how do you come out of this situation which is not of your making, which you are not in a position to control? How do you minimize the damage to yourself? That is really the question which Indian diplomacy is confronted with. And here you have two schools of thought. One is everyone agrees that the substance of your policy is more or less decided because of the huge interests you have in the Gulf states. But others feel that, you know, notwithstanding that, you could have nuanced your policy better. You should have said something about the Iranian supreme leader being assassinated. You could have said something about the girls' school being targeted or bombed. You could have said something about the Iranian naval vessel being sunk and a large number of sailors being. So that would have not changed your policy, but you would have managed the nuances, the optics around it better. But overall, this situation is not one which is in any way in your interest, and you can't get out of it without some amount of damage to your interest. You have to try to minimize it to the extent you can. Now, where Pakistan is concerned, I think, you know, many of us convinced ourselves that Pakistan is irrelevant.
Right.
It doesn't count. It's a failed state. It's going down the tube. It's not true. It has a certain relevance. The countries which surround it understand its relevance, and from time to time, many times in the past, they've been very nimble in offering themselves as a kind of broker where other great powers are concerned, and this is what they're doing this time. I think we should take a clinical view and not get carried away by this angst about Pakistan is so active and we are just sitting on the sidelines.
What do you think?
Yeah, as far as Pakistan is concerned, I've got some pretty strong views. I think it's, as Ambassador said, a broker, fundamentally. It's been a broker right from 1947. It's a rentier state. It's a country, as my friend Sashita Road, who was professionally and personally close, said, it's the only army in the world which has a country. Most countries have armies, but Pakistan is a country which has an army which has a country attached to it. So, Pakistan is actually a disgrace to Asia. It's a rentier state. What it did in 1972 as a conduit to China for Richard Nixon, who was the biggest critic of India, and in the Bangladesh war, he sent the 7th Fleet to Bangladesh to intimidate us. And Nixon was the great friend of Pakistan. And in 1979, China and America form diplomatic relations. So Pakistan's been a long-term broker, and it's a gun for hire. In an interview by the foreign minister, Ishaq Dar or whoever, to Sky News, he confessed that we've done the dirty work for America and Britain for the past 30, 40 years in Afghanistan, in here, there, everywhere. So we are unfortunate to have a neighbor like that. And I've often written that people say, oh, you can't change your neighbors. But I say that you can change their behavior. Forget changing the neighbor. We change their behavior, and by that we have to have, as we did in Operation Sindoor. But India has weaknesses of narrative. We won the Operation Sindoor battle, but we lost the narrative battle, and we had to send Shashi Tharoor, of all people, to tell the world how good, our battle, our victory in Sindoor was. So we have a lot of improvement that we need to make. Not only narrative, that's soft power, but also in our defense capabilities, corruption, healthcare, education, civic governance, so that bridges don't fall down after they are constructed, in corruption at the civic level, at the municipal level, and judicial reform, law enforcement reform. You've got to focus on that. You cannot have judges sitting on their own accountability. You've got to have the NJAC, the National Judicial Appointment Commission, and what I call the NJAC2, which is the National Judicial Accountability Commission, where judges are held to account. In America, judges are held very strictly to account. We actually are elected many judges. So, these are the reforms we need to do. And as far as Pakistan is concerned, the interlocutor matter, I think they are an errand boy, a messenger boy. Nothing more than that.
Thank you, Minaz. So, when someone asks me why you've changed the discussion from Saturday to Sunday, did you know that there are talks going on in Pakistan on Sunday between the US and Iran, which is why you have placed this discussion on the same day as the talks that are going on in Pakistan? Well, I think one of the reasons why we thought we would have this at the end of the festival is also because this conflict has been through uncertain, nebulous. One of the reasons why we thought we'd have the discussion towards the end of the festival is because if we had it yesterday, we would probably have had some other discussion, and even in 24 hours, some of those things would change. So, coming to the last question of our discussion, and we'll throw it open to the audience because I think this is a subject everyone has an opinion on. There is a moratorium of 7 days, it was extended to 10 days. I have this question in two parts. So, do you think we should brace ourselves for a longer cruising campaign after 10 days? That's again conjecture. But do you think this conflict would escalate and expand in other areas in the region more dangerously?
Well, frankly, nobody quite knows.
Yes.
But whether the moratorium is a phase while both sides regroup and rearm for the next stage of the conflict. That's one possibility, and it's happened before. President Trump has used announcements of ceasefires. The Iranians have also on occasion to regroup, to consolidate themselves, and then are ready for the next phase of the conflict. That's one possibility. The second is that both sides have taken enough damage, and they've come to the assessment that this can go on forever and this is not in our interest. So possibly you will come to some kind of a negotiated deal, and which will enable both sides to declare victory. But I don't think anyone quite knows which one is it going to be. So we'll have to wait and see, unfortunately. My own sense is that both sides now probably feel that it's time to move away from this and find some formula whereby you can declare victory.
Okay. What do you think? Do you think Trump will declare victory and then move?
Yeah, I think what Trump is going to do, earlier I said about the two events which are happening in May, June, July, so he has to. He's running up against a wall. He's got to opt out. So he's going to say, we won. I'm out. Netanyahu said, no, we haven't finished the job. Iran's still got capabilities. We've got to finish the job. And Jared Kushner, who was basically his son-in-law, of course, Trump's son-in-law, and very close to Netanyahu, is going to try and again keep Trump in the war for as long as possible, kill as many people in Lebanon, Lebanon, and in Iran as possible. But Trump is going to say, no, I gotta get out. I won. Make a statue for me. It's being put up in Venezuela. Now,
He doesn't have the appetite to be running a longer campaign.
who?
Donald Trump.
No, Trump can't. He's got events coming up, the football cup and his July 4th celebration. He's running up against a brick wall. He's going to get out, but he's going to say, I won, put up my statue, like the Peace Nobel, and then he's going to get out. And the Iranians are going to start laughing, but they've suffered a lot. But they're going to build the capability quickly, because they're a Persian civilization, 5,000 years old. What is America? It's living on stolen Native American land, an economy built on African slave labor for 300 years. That's America. And comparing it to Persian civilization.
Well, for me, I think we have to lower our sights. What are the lessons for us? And to me, the lessons both from this war and the conflict in Ukraine is that you have to manage your neighbors better. You can't choose your neighbors, you can't change your neighbors, so you have to manage your neighbors much better. You don't want to go into a situation. You see, if you ask President Putin today, before he embarked on the invasion of Ukraine, would you have liked to be where you are today? And you would say no. And similarly for the combatants in this war. Nobody wants to be in a kind of situation where you're facing prolonged conflict with no end in sight. I think in our neighborhood, we have to focus on our neighbors. You cannot disregard them, you can't treat them as irrelevant, and much as you dislike them and however provocative they have been to you, you have no option but to be.
Thank you. So, we have a lot of stockbrokers in the audience sitting here. I'm sure they're quite enthused by your prediction that Trump's going to go back, and I'm sure they'll be going back happy. Today is Sunday, and tomorrow the markets will be differently.
Traders think very differently, but nonetheless, we'd like to take questions from traders.
Yes.
It's important how the market does.
Yes, so before I throw it open to the house, thank you very much, Ambassador Akbar and Vinas Burchan. One of the things I must say, thank you, big round of applause. Big round of applause. Yes, we're sitting in the city of Mumbai, and I was told that we are talking about Hormuz Strait and their stakeholders, the Americans, the Iranians, there's another stakeholder, the Parsis. Because Hormuz Strait, how can the Parsi not be a stakeholder for Hormuz Strait?
Absolutely. And India is the only country in the world which has given refuge, safe haven, to Parsis, Jews, persecuted Christians, and every community, and all have lived happily here, never been persecuted in India.
Great. So, shall we have the house? The floor is open. Please ask questions. We have some time at hand. Yeah.
I won't be asking all the intelligent questions because you're probably far better versus
If I can request you to keep your questions brief.
Yeah, okay. So what I see is, I don't know when the war is going to get over, but I see future for India. One, Philippines is closing down. A lot of their global consulting centers of 20,000 are closing down. They don't know what to do, and they are very, business sensitive, what you call centers. And I understand some of them are going to shift to India. There's a lot of opportunities for India. But the greatest opportunity will be when the war is over, when everybody wants to reconstruct their refineries, their buildings, they will get that labor from India. And I think we should look forward for that.
So, should I take that? Yes, please.
Yeah, I agree. I think that once the war is over, and it will be over, for the reasons that we've outlined, there will be a huge surge in economic activity, rebuilding defense equipment, industrial equipment. And there is no other country, as I said again earlier, which is so underdeveloped like India, which needs development, has engineering talent, has software talent, has AI talent, and a huge consumer market, as major producers like Apple and so on have recognized. So India is going to benefit greatly, but we have to be a little bit patient. We've got to reform our entire ecosystem of economics. I sort of say that healthcare, education, our tax system, economic reforms, civic management, corruption, and governance. All of that is important because at the bottom of it all is poverty. We've got 5% of extreme poverty in our country today. In 1947, it was 80%. Our literacy level in 1947, after Macaulay and benign British rule for 190 years, our literacy rate was 12%. Our lifespan was 32 years. Now, 80 years later, up and down, our lifespan has gone up to 71, literacy is 80%, and extreme poverty has gone down from 80% under the British to 5%. But there's still poverty, not extreme poverty. No famines in India after 1947. Shortages, yes. But under British rule for 190 years, most people here don't realize that there were 31 major famines in this country under the British. The last one was in 1943, the Great Bengal Famine. And the first one was in 1870, again in Bengal, where millions of people died. So India has got a lot of work to do, but the future after the war is very good. So,
nobody's spoken about the personal agendas of Trump and Netanyahu.
Sorry?
The personal agendas that they have.
That's terrible.
Is that true, not true? Does one believe?
We'll ask
the
both
press,
the
or-
speakers, yes.
Terrible. His personal agenda, if I mention that, Jared Kushner and all of Trump's family, as you correctly mentioned, are fully involved in making money. See, Trump is a failed real estate developer. From the time he inherited a real estate empire from his father, Frederick, German. His mother was British, a Scottish woman. So he's German-British, Trump. He inherited $1 million empire in real estate. For 40 years, he bankrupted it. Complete bankruptcy. He went bankrupt 4 times under the American chapter 11. So he had a failed career in real estate, and he's using politics in order to do what he couldn't do as a businessman for 40 years. And his entire family, Donald Jr., Eric, and Jared, his son-in-law, they're all involved in crypto. And Pakistan is their favorite, because in Pakistan, you fly out from Washington to Islamabad, and you can do a deal with the general in 1 hour. Where in India, you go to additional secretary, joint secretary, main secretary, and go to the so-and-so committee. It'll go on for 1 year, and the Americans know it. So they go straight to Pakistan and make millions. As you said, the Trump personal agenda is a disgrace. It has been done in a manner that what he calls third world, I won't use the word SH, to the T, whole countries do. Trump is doing exactly that.
So do you think this, I'll restrict myself to the current scenario, so do you think there is a personal trigger involved?
No, there is a personal trigger, certainly. And both Prime Minister Netanyahu and Trump, their personalities and their inclinations have a great deal to explaining the conflict. But let's not forget, Iran, US and Israel have a deep history of animosity. They have not been together in the same room at all. And the iron entered not just Trump, the American psyche, where Iran is concerned in 1979 and their diplomats being taken hostage, etc., and with Iran supporting Hezbollah and Hamas in the attacks on Israel, Israel feels the same way. And of course, the Iranian position on the United States is that this is the great Satan and Israel has no right to exist. So this is a triangle of deep animosity and distrust. So while the personalities play a role, but the personalities are standing on a huge architecture of distrust and animosity which have accumulated over 2 generations at least.
Thanks. Anybody? Any other question? One of my professors in New York once said you scorpions in a bottle. But there was a remark. Richard Fetz once spoke about the contenders in Middle East. Yes. Yes, please. Yes.
Why do you
Who's first? Who's got the mic?
Iran and
Yeah.
Israel? Why have we not, or why have we not talking about why are we not talking about United Nations at all here? I mean, what is their role? Wasn't United Nations created after
100% correct.
with the idea that never again, but here again we are, and none of us
The United Nations have been rendered completely impotent. It has done nothing. The UNSC, the United Nations Security Council, has not taken note of this. When there was that illegal war in Iraq, at that time, at least in 2003, the UNSC did say that this is illegal. There was no resolution by the UNSC. But there was some legality when Tony Blair and George Bush went into Iraq on WMDs, but didn't exist. So patently illegal. But now the UNSC is sleeping, saying we have no role to play. It's almost as if they've gone comatose. Terrible. The United Nations has real disgrace.
You see, the UN is not a separate entity. There's no organization, there's no thing called the UN. The UN is made up of the member states. And in the member states, the most important are the great powers. If the great powers themselves are in a conflict, the United Nations goes into inability. There's nothing it can do. Just like in the Ukraine situation, because Russia, which has veto powers, was involved, or now because the US is involved. So the UN is most effective when the Security Council wants to act and the great powers are not directly involved. Or they don't feel it necessary, they feel it's all right if the UN Security Council gets involved. But when they have a stake in the conflict, the UN becomes totally immobile and almost irrelevant.
it is irrelevant.
So we have time for one more question. They are around, their books are here. You can ask them the questions after this, but I have time for one more question.
I have 2 questions. The first is
Keep them short, please. Yes.
the first question to both is Iran. Am I loud enough?
Yes.
Yes. Yeah.
Is that the Iranians or the Persians
Yeah.
and the Jews are an extremely determined community for the last thousands of years. This war, if it ends, will erupt in another war after some time, after they are equal. Second question is, how do we deal and become better friends with our neighbors?
You want
Well, how do we deal better with our neighbors is different from how do we become friends with our neighbors. You don't have to be friends with your neighbors. You don't have to have normal relations, but you must have stability. You don't want the kind of situation which there was between Bangladesh and India like a few months ago, or between Pakistan and India. You want more stability because stability enables you to grow faster and to attend to your domestic challenges. So the challenge is, how do you make South Asia more stable? And nobody really has an answer to it. I think you have to keep trying. One problem is that if you look around the world, everywhere people have problems with their neighbors. Who could have thought that US and Canada would be in the situation that they are in today? So neighbors are difficult all over the world, but you have to keep dealing with them.
Final point, as far as neighbors are concerned, Pakistan is the problem. But you must remember that Bangladesh and Nepal, 2 neighbors who were a problem till a few months ago, have suddenly become very friendly. So if India exercises patience with Tariq Rahman in Bangladesh, the Prime Minister, who's now actually saying that Bangladesh should mark the genocide of the of East Pakistan. Our entire relationship with this important neighbor Bangladesh has been to an extent repaired, and with Nepal as well, with the new Prime Minister. So good things are happening there. Pakistan remains a problem, but that too will eventually come around.
I think we've run out. Do you have a question?
One question here.
So we don't have time for too many questions. But you have a question here and then a question, quick question here, that's it. So we'll come to you. Yes, we'll come to her as well. So just
Thank you. My question is to both of you. Regarding this entire war and its stake, where United States is concerned, was it simple animosity or was it expansionism that was the actual motive of the war? Because that entire region is very rich in oil and extremely rich, and even at the Shah time, there was a lot of concessions given to them, and therefore that survival existed till Khomeini didn't come in. So my question is that, you see, now when he spoke about Venezuela, what he did in Venezuela, what he's threatening in Cuba, is it a wider kind of an understanding that that it is more control over a wider world than simple animosity?
Well, so far, insofar as one could detect a rationale in President Trump's policies, he was consolidating in his own hemisphere, which included Venezuela, which includes Cuba, Canada, Greenland. It didn't appear that he was keen or he had ambitions to expand into the wider global stage. So, military intervention in the Gulf appears therefore out of character. But he's not a consistent person, and US policy has not been consistent. So it's possible there was a view that if we can bring the Iranians down, or we can change the regime or change the architecture in Iran, we will have much more control over the global hydrocarbon market. And possibly there was that element was there. But in my reading, I think the calculation was a simple one, that Iran is weaker than it's ever been in the last 40 years. This is too good an opportunity to let pass.
I think, Zina, if I may answer your question, why America has an interest in the Middle East? It's oil. Now, go back to 1951. At that time, from 1900 to 1951, the Anglo-Iranian Oil Company had complete control over Iranian oil. That's the British, which is now British Petroleum, the Anglo-Iranian Oil Company. In 1951, the Iranians said, it's our oil, it's not British oil, so we'll now take over. So they took it over. The British were very upset. They just gotten out of India, or thrown out of India, and they said, we're going to lose our oil. So they conspired with the CIA in America, and Harry Truman, the president, said, no, we don't want to do anything. A coup, internal coup. Eisenhower came, and he said, yeah, go ahead. So the MI6, British External Intelligence Agency, CIA, engaged in street unrest, and in 1953, they overthrew the democratically elected Prime Minister of Iran, Mohammad Mossadegh, and they took complete control and put the Shah of Iran in as a puppet of the West. That continued till 1979. And after 1979, this Islamic revolution, which I think has been terrible in many ways, but what happened before that was even more terrible. Because of that, and Greater Israel, the fact that Netanyahu has said that Trump is the most pro-Israeli leader in the. What Netanyahu said is that Donald Trump is the most pro-Israeli president in U.S. history. He's literally very, very close to Jared Kushner, Trump's son-in-law. So when they got the opportunity, as Ambassador said, they attacked, and it was a Netanyahu-Trump operation. But the history of Iran shows that it had democracy The Shah of Iran came in as a puppet, and then due to the Islamic Revolution, things have been a mess for 47 years, and that's why it's led to this particular war.
Thank you. One last question we have here.
I saw an interview of former Foreign Secretary Shiv Shankar Menon, who says that silence can never be a strategy. What is your opinion? Could we have said something, because Iran is a friend of ours?
Well, as I said, in my view, we should have not been as reticent as we were on these episodes, including the sinking of the naval vessel. But these are judgment calls, because there is a certain pressure on you because of the fact that there are 10 million Indians in the Arabian Gulf countries. And those are your primary responsibilities. Let's not forget, during the first Gulf War, when Saddam Hussein, Iraq invaded Kuwait, you were the only country in the world which was actually dealing with him, because your priority was getting the Indians back. So there is a certain weight on your policy making because of the fact that there are so many Indians living in the Gulf. And that acts, that becomes part of the judgment call you're going to make. So it's not an easy decision for the government, but in my view, as Ambassador Shiv Shankar Menon said, I think we should have said something. But other people can disagree. People have different views.
Thank you everyone. We don't have time for any more questions. We have had a wonderful discussion of 50 minutes, of an hour. And no, we don't have time. They're here. We can ask. No, we don't have time. We will be. We have to move on to the next one. But the gentlemen are here. Their books are here outside. Please do have conversations with them, and you can get the book signed. Thank you very much.
First
and thank
of
you very
all,
much.
huge round of
Wonderful.
applause, please, for